All right, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the 1980 Mr. Olympia competition held in Sydney, Australia, and the controversy surrounding that Olympia. The 1980 Olympia goes down as one of the most infamous competitions of all time because of the many circumstances surrounding it that made it very controversial. So the main reason it was controversial had to do with Arnold Schwarzenegger making his comeback that year. He had retired in 1975, 5 years prior to this Olympia. Then he came back and ended up winning that year. So let's talk about why that was controversial. So number one, he had been retired for 5 years and he was filming movies and doing all that stuff in Hollywood. But also, he was actually promoting the Olympia from 1976 to 1979. Him and Jim Lorimer were working together as co-promoters of the show in Columbus, Ohio. So the fact that a lot of people believe politics were involved in Arnold winning had a lot to do with the fact that Arnold was an actual promoter of the Olympia prior to that year. So a lot of people thought, he knew people behind the scenes. He was a promoter. It was rigged for him to win because of this. And that's part of what played into the controversy of that year's Olympia. So also, at the time, he was currently filming for Conan the Barbarian. And apparently he claimed he only trained for 8 weeks for that year's Olympia. So that's another reason it was controversial that he won, because he claimed he barely trained at all for that Olympia, because 8 weeks, relative to what other people were probably training, that's nothing for an Olympia, only training for 8 weeks. So the 3 years prior, Frank Zane had won. So Frank Zane was the returning defending champion. So he had won 3 years prior. So he was obviously a favorite to win in that year's competition. Also, Mike Mentzer, the year prior in the 1979 Mr. Olympia, had also won the over 200 category, which is the heavyweight category of the Olympia, the year prior. So he was first place in the heavyweight category. Frank Zane was first place in the lightweight category, the under 200 category, and Frank Zane ended up taking the overall. So the year prior, it was between Frank and Mentzer to actually win the entire Olympia. So Mentzer was obviously a favorite going into the 1980 Olympia as well. So the top three guys that everybody was looking at were mainly Frank Zane, Mike Mentzer. Then no one really knew how Arnold would look, but obviously everyone had him in that top three spot because he had won so many Olympias in years prior. So Arnold came in looking pretty good, but a lot of the controversy stemmed from the fact that Arnold was pretty shady in the way that he approached the stage. So when they would call out poses that Arnold was not strong in, for example, the side tricep pose, there's a famous photo of Arnold hitting a side bicep pose where they called for a side tricep, and he acted like he didn't hear them say side tricep. Because he knew that his side tricep wasn't as strong as showing off his bicep peaks. So when he came into this Olympia, a lot of his body parts looked a little bit, kind of average compared to how they had looked before. But his arms, for the most part, looked exactly how they looked back in his prime in the early 70s. So he tried to show off his arms whenever he could. And a lot of people kind of noticed that. When they would call out mandatory poses, he would specifically try to hit poses that showed off his bicep instead. So one specific example was that side tricep, where they specifically called for a side tricep and he ended up hitting a bicep shot instead. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on in that Olympia that Arnold was pulling to kind of try to present himself in the best possible light. So that kind of made him look shady as well, because he was repeatedly going against what the judges were saying to try to hit shots that he looked the best in. So another famous shot in this Olympia was when he hit the abs and thighs shot, because that was apparently his weakest shot of the entire show, because apparently a lot of people thought that his abs looked pretty mediocre in that shot. So here's the famous photo of the abs and thighs. Again, I guess a lot of people thought this was not his best shot. In fact, they thought it was his worst shot, and they thought this really exposed the subpar level of conditioning that he brought that year. So here's what the top six was. So Arnold placed first, Chris Dickerson placed second, Frank Zane placed third, Boyer Coe placed fourth, and Boyer Coe, this was arguably Boyer Coe's best year ever in terms of conditioning and size. He looked really good this year. Number 5 was Mike Mentzer. So a lot of people said that 4 and 5 were actually a tie between Boyer Coe and Mike. So 4th place was a tie between Boyer and Mike ended up in the 5th place spot. And 6th place was Roger Walker. So after this Olympia, apparently Frank Zane would actually go backstage and throw his trophy up against the wall. Mentzer was obviously pissed off, and Mentzer actually retired after this Olympia at the age of 29, and he vowed until the day that he died that this Olympia was rigged. Apparently when Chris Dickerson got second, he jumped off the stage in disbelief, and he said he can't believe it. And again, Menser were both pissed off. Menser and Boyer were both pissed off. Obviously, Menser went from winning the heavyweight division the year prior to placing 5th, so that was obviously a big upset. And the crowd apparently booed for all of these placings. When Arnold won, they booed. When Menser got 5th, they booed, and when Frank got 3rd, they booed. So obviously, the audience was not happy with this result either. And also, that year's Olympia was supposed to be broadcasted on CBS, but after the controversial decision, they actually did not air this on TV. So maybe the network saw that, this was not a good call, and they saw that the athletes were upset, and they thought, maybe we better not put this on TV. So the grand prize was $25,000 for first place, and to my knowledge, there's no prize money listed for any of the other placings. So if you didn't win that show, you basically got screwed out of any money at all. So that's the story of the 1980 Mr. Olympia and the controversy that ensued. It eventually led to Mike Menser retiring, like I said, a year later, which is probably the biggest controversial aspect of that year's Olympia, because Mike Menser arguably had a tremendous amount of potential at age 29, and that was probably way too young for him to retire. He could have gone on to do some great things in bodybuilding. So that's the story of the 1980 Mr. Olympia controversy. Please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Nick Strength and Power, signing out.